What is Steven? What is your emergency?
I need an ambulance. Lots of, we've
The
been-
ambulance.
Yes, please.
What's your name, sir?
Henry from Breda.
What kind of person does do this then, in your opinion?
I would say a psychopath. That's what I would say. Because no normal human would do that to his own family.
It was a horrific crime that sent shockwaves through the peaceful town of Stellenbosch in South Africa's Western Cape province. On the morning of January 27th, 2015, emergency responders rushed to the Van Breda family's large house after getting a call about an attack. The operator thought that the emergency call was a prank, but what they found when they arrived was a scene of terrible violence and bloodshed. The first thing they saw was blood everywhere, even running down the stairs like a waterfall, according to one paramedic. It was one of the worst crime scenes he had ever witnessed in his long career. Upstairs on the first floor, they found the bodies of the parents. Martin Van Breda, who was 54 years old, and the father, had been killed by tremendous axe blows to his head and body. His wife Teresa, aged 55, had suffered similar brutal axe injuries and was also dead. In another room, the lifeless body of the eldest son, Rudy, just 22 years old, was discovered. He too had been struck over and over with the axe. It was an extremely violent attack with severe trauma inflicted on all three victims. The daughter Marley, who was only 16 years old at the time, was still alive but badly injured and unconscious. She had ghastly head wounds where the attacker had tried to kill her with the axe as well. The attack on her was so severe that she ended up with brain damage and retrograde amnesia, leaving her no memory of what happened that night. The only person still conscious when help arrived was the youngest son, Henry Van Breda, aged 20. Bizarrely, he only had minor injuries compared to the devastating wounds suffered by the rest of his family members. It was Henry who had called emergency services around 7:15 that morning, almost 3 hours after the attack occurred. In a strange call that was later made public, Henry sounded weirdly casual as he reported,
My family and we were attacked by a guy, an axe.
The operator who took the call was so thrown off by Henry's calm tone that she initially thought it might be a prank. Nothing about Henry's demeanor suggested the panic and horror you would expect from someone who had just witnessed their entire family being massacred before their eyes by an intruder with an axe.
What was he like?
Like total calm. You would expect all that raids and stuff inside, but there was nothing. He was just calm.
When police arrived at the upscale De Zalza Winelands Golf Estate, they found Henry wandering around, wearing just his sleep shorts and socks, both covered in copious amounts of blood that would later be determined to be from his slain relatives. An axe and a knife belonging to the family were lying amidst the grisly crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry or robbery, immediately raising suspicions about Henry's claim of an intruder. From the very beginning, the story Henry Van Breda gave to explain what happened made very little sense. He claimed that sometime in the early morning hours, a man wearing dark clothing, gloves, and a balaclava to hide his face had broken into the home. This supposed intruder was armed with an axe and a knife. According to Henry, the man then launched a shockingly violent attack on his sleeping family members, striking them over and over with the axe in an extremely brutal manner. Henry alleged that at some point, he was able to fight off the attacker and disarm him, leading the intruder to flee the home on foot, presumably through an unlocked door or window, but leaving behind 2 murder weapons owned by the Van Breda family itself. There were numerous problems with Henry's version of events that caused intense skepticism on the part of police investigators. First, why would an intruder choose to attack this family in their upscale home inside a private, secure golf estate community? The motive did not seem to be robbery, since nothing was stolen. Second, If there truly had been an intruder, why was he so focused on trying to kill every family member instead of just taking valuables and leaving when confronted, as most burglars would? The extreme violence made no sense. Third, in his supposed fight with the intruder, how did Henry manage to escape with only very minor injuries, while his family bore the brunt of the savagery? An intruder trying to kill everyone would likely have inflicted worse harm on Henry. Fourth, why did Henry wait nearly 3 hours to call for emergency help after surviving such a violent home invasion? And why did he bizarrely call his girlfriend first before dialing for assistance? And finally, what stood out to investigators was Henry's eerily calm behavior in the aftermath. There was no emotional distress or visible trauma that you would expect from someone who had just been the victim of such a horrific attack by an axe-wielding madman. His cool demeanor struck them as very suspicious. Over the next year and a half, authorities conducted an extremely thorough investigation into the attack, and the more evidence they uncovered, the more it appeared to implicate Henry van Breda as the actual perpetrator rather than an unknown intruder. DNA testing confirmed that the copious bloodstains found all over Henry's clothes and body matched the blood of his slain parents and brother. Yet somehow, in the midst of this merciless axe attack, Henry himself had not been seriously injured. Some of Henry's wounds did seem suspicious to medical examiners, who theorized that they may have been self-inflicted in an attempt to make it look like he too was a victim.
You know, if you think you were just involved in an altercation, a physical fight, a struggle for life and death, you know, people holding onto each other, you would maybe expect to see bruises around the forearms, around the upper arm as you're pulling and pushing. But nothing.
Call records also revealed that in the hours before Henry reported the crime, he had been using his computer to search for local emergency numbers. This suggested he took his time staging the bloody scene after committing the murders, rather than calling for help immediately, as you would expect from a real victim. Perhaps most damagingly, surveillance camera footage from the Gulf Estates security system that could have captured the alleged intruder was found to be missing or corrupted for the time frame when the attack occurred. This fueled speculation that Henry may have intentionally tampered with or destroyed the video evidence. A young man with no clear motive for such savagery, Henry made an unlikely butcherer. However, reports did surface that he had been struggling with drug addiction issues and had previously attended rehab. His possible drug ties and lifestyle were scrutinized for potential motives. There were also unconfirmed rumors that his financial troubles and the threat of being cut off by his wealthy parents could have driven him to commit the bloody crimes. In the end, prosecutors could not establish a definitive motive, only that Henry's account did not add up. In April 2017, with a mountain of circumstantial evidence working against him, authorities finally arrested Henry van Breda and charged him with 3 counts of murder, 1 of attempted murder for the attack on his sister Marley, and obstruction of justice. He vehemently maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty and doubling down on his intruder story when the high-profile trial began a month later. For several weeks, Van Breda's defense team attempted to poke holes in the prosecution's case. Ultimately, though, the weight of the forensic evidence, witness testimony about Henry's behavior, and the lack of evidence supporting his intruder claim proved too much to overcome. In May 2018, Henry van Breda was convicted on all charges by the judge. The evidence proved that the attack was motivated by nothing less than the sense of hatred towards his family, the judge stated in rendering the guilty verdicts. 2 weeks later, showing no remorse, the 23-year-old Van Breda was handed down 3 life sentences, 1 each for the murder of his mother, father, and brother. He received an additional 15 years for the attempted murder of his sister Marley. The judge said that while a definitive motive could not be determined, Van Breda must have seen his family as a barrier to what he wanted out of life. He ordered the young man to be immediately taken into custody to begin serving the life sentences. In the afternoon after his sentencing, Henry van Breda was seen smoking cigarettes and exhibiting no visible emotion as he was transferred from the court holding area to the notorious Pollsmoor prison to await transfer to a permanent maximum security facility. While justice was ultimately served by convicting and imprisoning Henry van Breda for the rest of his life, the horrific murders he committed will never be fully understood or have a satisfactory explanation.
The Henry that I know, nothing in the 19 years that I knew him led me to think that there's a danger in Henry.
How could a young man from a wealthy, privileged background brutally slaughter his own parents and brother with an axe? What could have driven someone to such unspeakable violence against their own flesh and blood? Was it money troubles, substance abuse, mental illness, or simply an evil presence within Henry that manifested that terrible night as an inexplicable rage? We may never know the true motivations. What we are left with is a tragic story of a family being violently torn apart in the most horrific way imaginable by one of their own. 3 innocent lives were suddenly and brutally extinguished. A father and a mother who doted on their children, and a young man who had his entire future ahead of him.